Hello everyone, welcome to this extra chapter on weekly performance reviews. In this video, I'm going to be showing you how you're going to perform weekly reviews on how your model performed throughout the week, and then how did you executed that particular model and performed, right? Now, till now, I've been mostly teaching you about the technical aspects of trading, right? Which is like literally the most important aspect of trading. But also, along with that, you also have to be familiar with the rest of the aspects, right? Because they all also play an important and integral role in your trading, right? This other side of things related to trading is what we call the management side of trading, right? Now remember, technical or the technical aspects of trading is going to be your first priority, but also at the same time you've got to be aware that you've got other stuff like journaling, performing weekly reviews, doing self-evaluation, and so on. Right? You've got these other things as well, and these things will help you measure and gauge your performance, and will actually help you let you know how you performed over a course of a week or a month or a quarter. Right? Because if you don't know those stuff and you're just trading randomly without a routine, without a plan, and without knowing how you're performing, then the technical side of stuff and the technical side of trading is going to become redundant and ineffective for you, right? Because we know that after all, trading is a mix of all these different aspects, like the technical side assisting you with your analysis both on the higher time frame, lower time frame, and your entries. And then you've got the management side of trading, which contains stuff like risk management, trade management, journaling, backtesting, forward testing, right? And then you've got the psychological side of stuff, which deals with and which are concerned with your execution, your model, your consistency, and all of that, right? And what you're going to make sure is that you are approaching all of this professionally, right? Every single of the aspect of these trading are being well thought, right? And they're being taken care of. Otherwise, any of those aspects alone serves no purpose, right? If you are using them alone, then they essentially become redundant, right? The only way they're going to be effective for you is if you use them together in a logical manner, and I'm going to show you that, right? Since now I've been only teaching about the technical side, but now I'm going to introduce you to this side of stuff as well, because this part of trading or this management part of trading plays as much important role as the other part, right? And with this, and with the taking care of this sort of trading, that will make sure that you are performing optimally, right? And that way your consistency would be on point, right? If you see any problems that you're facing, you would be easily able to solve those problems by opting or adopting specific coping mechanism or coping techniques, right? Which I'm going to be teaching you about. I'm going to make multiple chapters about this side of stuff related to trading, right? But in this particular chapter, I'm going to essentially introduce you to WPRs or weekly performance reviews, and we will discuss what are they, how they're done, and most importantly, what are the benefits of doing it, right? So let's go over to the next slide and let's discuss WPRs or weekly performance reviews. So first of all, as always, I'm going to start off with introduction to WPRs and will define it to you in the most effective way possible, right? So weekly performance reviews or WPRs are conducted or done to assess, measure, or gauge the performance of both your trading model and yourself, right? Now some of you might be wondering that what's the difference between the performance of my model and my performance, right? You're going to be wondering what's the difference. Now the idea behind that is pretty simple. First of all, you'll have to find a trading style, right? Your first objective as a trader is to find a trading style or trading system for you. And that particular system will tell you what to do and what not to do, right? Right? And how is that model is going to tell you those things is based on specific protocols and criterias that will essentially guide you to determining down liquidity and taking trades, right? And will generate trading ideas for you. Now, this model or this particular system will have three technical aspects, right? First of all, it's going to have specific rules and plans and routines to determine two things on the higher time frame. Your higher time frame down liquidity and higher time frame buys, right? That is going to be the first technical aspect of your system. Now I've taught you that there are two types of higher time frame drawn liquidity, and them being the short term drawn liquidity and the long term drawn liquidity, right? So that particular system of yours will guide you to determine these things on the higher time frame, right? That's the first technical aspect. The second part of that system of yours is going to be concerned with using concepts such as the open high low close concept, power of three, dealing ranges, CRT, and so on to build a narrative on the higher time frame in intraday charts, right? That's going to be the second part of your system. The third part of your system will be used for finding entry setups on the lower time frame, right? And for that you will have different entry models, right? And then you'll choose the one that suits you the best, and then you'll use that to find entries on the lower time frame, right? And for you, every single aspect of this particular trading system or model will be clearly and sharply defined, right? Without any subjectiveness, and everything is going to be completely objective. And your approach with it will also be fully objective, right? Now, obviously, this system cannot be turned into a fully mechanical model because of the amount of variables that are involved, right? But what matters is that it's going to be objective, and you're going to approach it objectively and professionally, right? And you're going to make sure that you are disciplined enough to consistently follow this without deviating from your plan, right? That's going to be your main priority as a trader. Now, the point I'm trying to make here is that you're going to have a complete trading system that will have planes and set rules and criteria for literally everything, both for higher time frame analysis, for determining drawn liquidity, for building narratives, and last but not least, for lower time frame entries, right? It will contain all of this stuff, right? Now, what you're going to do each weekend or each month, right? What you're going to do each at the end of each weekend, each month, as you're gonna go on, is you're gonna remember that model of yours, right? And you're gonna look back in time and look at the previous week's data or the previous month's data, and you're gonna use the frameworks and criteria for of your model, and you would look and see how your model could have traded this week, right? And how you could have traded this week with your model without any operating error, right? Or what are the ideal scenarios that would have been for you based on your models, right? You're going to consider all of those things. Now remember, for now you're not considering your execution yet, right? You're just looking in hindsight at the previous week's price action, and you're looking and recording what trades would your model would have offered, right? Now this isn't just gonna contain wins but including losses too, right? Because we know that no system is going to be fully perfect, right? Even if there's no operating error, it's still going to have losses, right? So you're going to go back in time, look at the previous week's data, and you're going to record all of these things. You're going to record the number of trades that you took, you're going to record the number of losses and wins that your model would have had, right? Theoretically, right? And hypothetically, and you're going to record all of that, right? And once that is done, you're going to have a complete set of data for the previous week that would show you and that would tell you how the ideal performance of your model would have looked like, right? And it would contain all of the data. And in just a minute, I will show you and tell you what data are you going to collect, and will show you the whole process step by step. But just know that you will have a complete set of data for the previous week for how your model would have performed, right? Without you executing it, right? It would collect it. You would just go back in time and collect all of that data on how your model would have performed theoretically, right? And you're gonna include all of the losses, all of the wins, and all of the days that your model would have skipped based on the rules and criterias and protocols that you would have developed for your model, right? So now you've got this data on one side, right? And then on the other hand, you would also go back, right? And you would look at the previous week, and you would look at your trades that you actually executed the past week, and you're going to look at all of those trades that you executed, and you're going to collect data on those particular set of trades as well. And you're going to in the same way record stuff like the amount of trades that you took, the number of wins losses that you had, and you're going to record the other metrics as well, like win rate, average risk to reward ratio, absolute drawdown, relative drawdown, everything, right? You're going to record everything for for how you've performed throughout the past week, right? So on the one hand, you've got the data on how your model would have performed, and then on the other hand, you will have this set of data, this another set of data, which will show you how you performed, right? Then the next step would be, and then your next objective would be to perform a comparative analysis between both of these data, and you're going to compare both of the data with each other, and you will essentially calculate your consistency based off of that, and that will give you a percentage number, and that percentage number will indicate or show you how well or how bad you performed, right? And it will essentially show you what is your consistency. Either you are fully consistent, you are fully consistent, or you're just average, right? It's going to show you that. Now let's not get ahead of ourselves, right? But that's essentially what you're going to do. Now don't worry or start panicking, right? I'm going to show you how you're going to do all of this in this particular video, so there's nothing to worry about. So the first point is that WPRs, or weekly performance reviews, will be used to assess and measure your model's performance and then your own performance, right? Now I've said all of that stuff about the model performance, right? Now some of you might be wondering, what if I don't have a model at the moment, right? Or if I don't know what sort of trading style suits me? Then for that, the solution is still performing weekly performance reviews and WPRs, right? Because at the beginning stages of your journey, what you're going to do is, first of all, learn about different styles of trading, learn about these different entry models, right? And learn about how you're going to do higher time frame analysis, right? Which you're currently learning from me in CPI. So you don't have to worry about that, right? In CPI, I'm already showing you how to do higher time frame analysis. And not only that, I'm also showing you my trade breakdowns and stuff, which is basically showing you the live application of these stuff in live markets, right? So for you people and you student, the first part of the problem, which is learning how to do all of this stuff and learning how to do higher time frame and lower time frame analysis, is solved, right? Because you're learning that from me throughout these levels of CPI, so you don't have to worry about that. And at the end of CPI, you'll be fully equipped with enough, more than enough knowledge to be able to do that, right? The second part is entry models, right? Meaning how you're gonna take entries on the lower time frame and what are the time frames you're gonna use to take entries, right? That is also not a problem for you, right? Learning that is also not a problem for you, right? Because in later levels, I'll also be sharing different trading styles and different entry models with you that will guide you on how to take entries in different ways and on different time frames, right? So you don't have to worry about that too, right? So with CPI, you're gonna have these different models on your table, right? And then you're gonna be confused as to which one to choose for you, right? And not only that, but most importantly, which style or which particular entry model actually suits your mental capacities and your psychology, right? Which one suits your personality the best? And then for you to determine that, you're gonna use this exact process right here, WPRs, right? Which I will show you in this chapter, and you're gonna do these WPRs, or weekly performance reviews, every single week, right? And just to make sure that it's gonna be a lot of hard work, right? You're gonna have to do a lot of hard work, and you'll gather data around different models and systems with these WPRs throughout weeks or months, and then you're gonna see which model and which trading style performed better, right? And which one has a style or a system that suits your personality the most, right? And you're going to consider aspects like holding times of trades, right? So for example, certain models will show you that they hold trades for longer, and maybe you aren't that big of a fan of holding trades longer, and that messes up with your performance. So you're going to then look at data of another model, and maybe that another model show you that its holding time is just a few hours or few minutes, right? And then you're gonna see whether that particular style suits you, and then you're going to consider this factor and do a bunch of analysis and consider multiple psychological and mental factors, and at the end you're going to end up having a model that is optimal to you and that is optimal to your style of trading, right? Now obviously it's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be the best one for you. It's going to be better than everything else that you've tried, right? Then after all of that studies, you're going to end up with your own optimal trading system, right? Having all of these the three aspects, right? The higher time frame analysis for determining drawn liquidity. The second aspect would be building narrative in the third aspect for taking lower time frame entries, right? And after doing all of this stuff, you're going to have then your own trading system, right? Which will contain all of these stuff, right? And what your job would be as a trader is that you would just have to show up every weekend and at the end of each month and calculate your model's performance, and then you're going to calculate your own performance based on the trades that you executed. Now if you ask me what is my style of trading, then I've already done all of this stuff years ago, right? And I literally tried tens of models, and then at the end I ended up with the one that I'm currently using it, right? Which is the intraday trading system. And you've seen me analyze charts, take entries with it in my trade breakdowns, right? Now I'm not going to force you to adopt this particular trading system or model, right? Because you might not have the same mental capacities or same taste as me, right? And maybe if you skip that first part that I just told you about and just use my model because apparently your mentor uses it, then it could end up being bad for you, right? Because in trading, what works for someone else doesn't mean that it will work for you, right? But you have to actually first try out all of the different approaches and all of the different models, and then decide based off of those things, right? Essentially what you're going to do is you're going to perform evaluations on different models, and you're going to compare it with your mental capabilities and mental capacities, and you're going to see which one model suits you the best based on the holding time, based on the win rate and risk reward ratio relation, right? You're going to consider all of those aspects. So what my model or my system currently is an intraday system, right? I'll also be showing you a swing trading system and a short-term trading system, right? Now the higher time frame analysis and all of that stuff like determining drawn liquidity, buys, and building narrative is the same for all of these systems, right? The only difference between these systems is going to be the entry models, right? For example, with my intraday system, I do my analysis on the higher time frame like the weekly, daily, and the 4 hour, and then my entry models, and I take my entries on the 15 minute, right? Then, for example, for a swing trading model, the higher time frame analysis is gonna stay the same. You're gonna use the same time frames, right? The daily, weekly, monthly. But then the only difference is gonna be that your gonna entries are gonna be on the 4 hour, right? So that's going to be the only difference between these different systems, right? Now, enough of that. I already talk a lot about just a single point. So now let's get back to the chapter and let me show you how you're going to perform weekly performance reviews. So another point is that weekly performance reviews or WPRs are performed both at amateur level and professional level, right? At professional level, you're going to measure your and your model's performance and do a comparative analysis, and that's it. Whereas in amateur level, you're going to measure the performance of different system and models and then compare all of them until you find your ideal and perfect system or model, right? So there is that. The last but not least, the most important point is that WPRs are an integral part of trading, right? And now you could probably guess why. Now, moving on, here we'll discuss how WPRs are done at amateur level, right? Now, I've already discussed all of this in the first slide, but let me revise it once more so that it sticks in your head. Now, WPRs at amateur level are conducted to gather data about your model to calculate key metrics such as the number of trades, win rate, average risk reward ratio, and many more metrics which we'll discuss in a minute, right? With the help of WPRs, you're going to perform comparative analysis between different models, different entry models in system to determine which one is better, and most importantly, which one suits your personality and style the best and the most, right? That's what your aim and objective is going to be at amateur level, right? WPRs will help you identify and determine trading styles and models that suits you the most, right? WPRs enables you to measure and compare the performance of different entry models, right? This is the stuff you're going to do at amateur level with WPRs. Moving on, in this slide, we're going to discuss why WPRs are done at professional level and how they are done, right? WPRs are done to measure the performance of your model throughout the week, right? Again, I already discussed this before as to how that's done, right? So there's no need to revise it back. Now, another point is that WPRs are used to assess and measure your performance by comparing the data from your execution, meaning the trades that you actually took throughout the week and executed, and it is going to compare and then you're going to compare it with your model's ideal performance throughout the data you collected about it, right? And it will use a metric called ECR, or execution consistency ratio, right? Now, don't worry, ECR will also be discussed in the next slide, right? So there's nothing to worry about. Now, WPRs will help keeping you aligned with your goals and will help you maintain self-awareness and self-consciousness about your performance, and it will tell you whether how good or bad you are performing and executing, right? And then based off of that data, you can adjust yourself and adjust your plan or your system, right? Now we know that there are two steps to solving a problem, right? The first step, which is the most important step, is identifying the problem, right? The reason it's the most important step is because it's gonna actually let you know that the problem is there in the first place. If you don't know that there's a problem, then how you're gonna solve that, right? The first part of solving a problem is diagnosing that problem, or identifying a problem, and only then you'll be able to look for a solution, right? The second step, which is solving that problem, is the easiest step, right? Solving a problem or issue is easy, but identifying and diagnosing that problem is the hardest part, right? For example, a cancer, cancer has four stages, right? If you identify and diagnose cancer in the first stage, then you can easily solve or get rid of it by either chemotherapy or surgery, right? Or whatever. But if you fail to identify that cancer in the first place and you are not aware of it, then it's going to develop and develop and until it reaches the advanced stages, right? And then it's going to become nearly impossible for you to get rid of it or solve it, right? So getting rid of cancer is easy, but only if it's identified and diagnosed in the early stages, right? Which is the hardest part. Diagnosing and identifying a problem is the hardest part, right? And once you've successfully identified and diagnosed a problem in its early stages, then solving that problem is the easy part, right? So, in the same way as a trader, if you're not gonna perform weekly performance reviews or WPRs, right? Then how the hell are you going to get to know you about yourself, right? How you're going to measure whether you're performing good or not if you're not performing WPRs? And most importantly, you wouldn't know that a problem exists, and you wouldn't know the main cause and the main roots and reason behind your losses, right? You know that you are taking losses, but the most important part and the most important point is knowing the actual cause behind it, right? That's what matters. Knowing the actual cause behind your losses, and only then you're gonna do something about it, right? But if you know that you have losses but you don't know what are the reason behind these losses, then you're not going to be able to do anything about it. And that's exactly where WPRs, or weekly performance review, comes in, right? At the end of each week or each month, you're going to perform these reviews, and then that will let you know what sort of problems and what sort of mental issues or mental problems or execution problems are you struggling with. And then you'd be able to easily identify the root cause and the reason behind that problem, and then solving that problem is easy. You just have to find simple solution for it. For example, if you are taking losses because of FOMO, because you feel that you are missing out on trades, or because you are missing out on expansions or reversal, right? And you find that through performing WPRs, then what you can do about this FOMO is you can you can set rules of criteria for yourself and set protocols. And as soon as you feel the fear of missing out, you can then remind yourself that you're actually going through this problem and you're being a victim to this problem. And that way, when you aware yourself and remind yourself of that problem, you're gonna stop taking these extra losses, right? And that will make sure that you stay consistent, and then essentially those losses would fade away because you've now identified the root cause behind those problems, right? And you are only going to be able to do that with WPRs. That's why WPRs are so important, right? For example, let's say you did WPRs on different models in the execution, right? And you saw that most of your losses have long trade durations, right? Where most of your wins have short trade duration, which suggests that most of your losses come from trades that are held longer or that are held for longer period of times, right? And most of your wins come from trades which are held for shorter period of times, right? So based on this data, you're gonna know that you have a problem with holding trades. So what's the solution for that is going to be? It's going to be to approach a trading style or a model like intraday trading or scalping, which has short trade duration. And then you can notice that your losses have significantly reduced because you've solved it by getting away from trading styles such as swing trading, because you cannot hold trades for longer period of time, and most of your losses come from holding trades for longer period of times, right? And you've solved that by sticking to intraday trading or maybe scalping, right? But let's say you've never performed WPRs, right? Then tell me how the hell would have you identified that problem in the first place, right? Let alone solving it, right? You wouldn't even have known that you have the problem because you're not collecting data. You're not being self-aware and self-conscious, right? So you would be wandering around cluelessly without a single clue about why the hell are you experiencing these losses, right? That is why you're going to perform WPRs or weekly performance reviews. The last and most important point is that with the help of WPRs, you're going to make necessary adjustments to your model, right? And if they have any aspects that doesn't align with your mental capacities or capabilities, then you're going to adjust to those new scenarios and adjust your model to based on how you feel comfortable with it, right? You're going to do this both at professional level and at amateur level. Now let's move on. Now here let's discuss what ECR is, what it means, and by whom was it developed, and most importantly, how to actually calculate it and what's it's used for, right? So ECR or execution consistency ratio was developed by Sham, right, which is me. Now I know that some of you would be surprised here, right? But it's actually true. I'm the one that developed this concept called ECR, and since now I've been using it privately just for myself throughout the past few years, right? And just now that I'm sharing it with you in this video, right? This is the first time you've ever heard about ECR, and this is the first time I'm mentioning something like ECR, right? Or something like ECR has been mentioned. Now if you look up ECR anywhere else or the concept of ECR anywhere else, you're not gonna find a single person or a single source talking about either ECR or the concept that is used in ECR, right? Most journaling software don't even have this particular concept that I developed, right? Uh, which is used in ECR. Now, I had huge problems with my trading at the start of my journey, right? So then I had to come up with certain technique and mechanism so that I could actually solve it, right? I mostly struggle with psychological and mental issues like struggling with discipline, not being consistent enough, right? Because I'm like a really quick and hurrying person, right? And I struggle to maintain focus and have got some other issues as well, right? Related to ADHD and so on. But the thing is that I'm actually self-aware of it, and I've now built mechanism and techniques to cope with it, right? So I've solved them all. Now actually not solved them all, but the right would be that I've controlled them, right? Because they cannot be fully solved. They are a part of who you are and how you behave, right? And the only thing you can do about them is to control them, right? And that's exactly what I've done with these mental issues that I had and that I experienced at the start of my journey. I realized it pretty earlier that I cannot get rid of these problems, right? If I'm looking to get rid of these problems, then I'm not gonna succeed. The only way I'm gonna cope with these problems and these mental issues is by actually controlling it, right? because I know that they are a part of me, right? Being hasty and aggressive and hurrying is a part of me, right? And that cannot be gotten rid of. But what I can do about it is that I can remind myself that I'm starting to fall back to my natural instinct, right? And once I remind myself of it, right, and became self-aware of it, what happens is that now I've identified the problem, and now I can control it and adopt the techniques and mechanisms that I've built to cope with it, right? Now that's another topic in itself, and I can talk for days about it. But let's not get ahead of ourselves, and let's get back to what ECR is, right? So the point I was trying to make is that I developed ECR, and with the help of ECR, or execution consistency ratio, I can measure my consistency throughout the week or throughout the month, and I can see how good or bad I've performed, right? And if I've performed good, then my goal would be to maintain that for the next week. And if I've performed awfully or poor, then I'll try to find and look for the problems that essentially led me to performing badly, and then I'll try to solve them, right? Now, ECR is a metric for measuring consistency, right? The next point is that ECR is measured in ratio or percentages, right? With higher percentages, percentage indicates good consistency or excellent consistency, and a lower one indicates bad consistency, right? An ECR value of 100% would suggest full consistency, and anything below that would suggest and signal inconsistency or ineffectiveness in your approach, right? Okay, so now that we've discussed all of that theory, let's move over and let's discuss how WPRs are actually done and performed, right? So a WPR consists of three main parts, or the process of WPR consists three main parts. The first part involves gathering data on the performance of your model and trading system, right? The second part solely focus on collecting data on your performance, meaning your executions in the trade that you actually took throughout the week. And then the third part involves performing a comparative analysis between your model's performance and your execution, and then determining and calculating ECR, or execution consistency ratio, right? So let's discuss the first part in detail. Now, in the first part, what you're going to do is you're going to go back in time and look at the previous week's data, and you're going to look in hindsight and see what trades would have your model ideally offered to you based on your set rules and criteria, right? You'll record the number of trades your model would have potentially offered. You're going to record the number of losses and wins that your model would have produced, and you're going to do the rest of the shenanigans like calculating the win rate, the average RR, right? You're also going to calculate the absolute drawdown, right, which is basically a metric for knowing how did you start your week. For example, if you started the week with the first trade being a win, then your absolute drawdown is zero, right, because you did not experience any drawdown at the start of the week or absolute of the week, right? But if you started the week with a lost and experienced drawdown before moving into profit, then you're going to calculate that, right? For instance, let's say you lost the first two trades, right, and then win the next trade and moved into profit, then in that case your absolute drawdown would be minus 2r, right, because you experience a drawdown of two losses before moving into profit, right? What this helps us is that it lets us know whether taking trades at the start of the week or on Monday is good for us or not, right? Or whether how we start off the week, right? Is it with losses or is it with wins, right? Do we experience drawdown first and then win the next trades, or it's the opposite, right? It lets us know that, and then you can use this metric to adjust your model, or maybe skip Monday, or maybe more cautious at taking trades at the start of the week or at the start of the month, right? Because maybe you saw that there is a pre-occurring theme of you having absolute drawdown every week that you recorded, right? So this is a metric that is used for that particular purpose. Then we have the relative drawdown, which is basically a metric for calculating the maximum drawdown in between your trades throughout the week, right? It's just simple stuff, nothing complicated, right? And then at the end, you're gonna calculate your PNL. So And after doing all of this, you will end up having a data that would look something like this, right? You will have the trade, the number of trades, the number of wins, losses, the win rate, the average RR, and the drawdowns, etc., right? And then at the end, the PNL. This data shows you the performance of your model, right? Meaning how your model performed throughout the week. Remember, it does not take your execution into account, right? It does not take any operating errors into account, right? This data doesn't know anything about your execution. It just gives you a theoretical and ideal data about how your model performed without any operating error or anything throughout the week, right? You can see it has got losses as well, right? Because losses are inevitable and you're going to consider them too. And let's make sure to not make fool of yourself, right? By not noting the wins or ignoring the losses, right? You're gonna take you're gonna take and consider losses as well in this data, so you actually know that there is no inconsistency or ineffectiveness in the data, and you've actually considered everything, right? If you see that this is a loss that your model would have offered to you, then you should note that loss as well, right? Because that loss was offered by your model, so that is a part of your system. You cannot ignore that, right? So you would have to note everything down without any consistency. Then at the end of that their data, it will show you the performance of your model, right? So in this case, you can see that this hypothetical data or this hypothetical model produce 2 hour worth of profits throughout the week, which is more than enough, right? If you had risked $2,000 per trade, then this 2 hour would have equated to $4,000 worth of profits, right? So this is how this model and this hypothetical model perform throughout the week. This is just hypothetical data, right? Just for the sake of explaining this WPR process to you. Moving on, the next part is where you're going to measure your own performance, right? Meaning the trades that you executed and took throughout the week. You'll record the number of trades you executed, you'll record the number of losses and wins that you took, and then you're going to calculate the rest of the metrics as well, right? And then you will end up having a data looking like this, right? And it will show you the data of your trades that you actually executed throughout the week, throughout the past week. For example, this week you took 5 trades with 2 wins and 3 losses with a 40% win rate and with an average RR of 2R, and you ended up the week with 1 hour profits, right? You can see here this data showed how you performed throughout the week and essentially shows you your execution and your performance. The third part is where you're gonna The third part is where you're going to conduct a comparative analysis between your model's performance and your own execution and performance, right? You will compare all of the metrics against each other, right? For example, you're going to compare how many trades your model theoretically offered versus how you actually executed throughout the week. Similarly, you're going to compare the numbers of wins and losses between your model and your execution, and then you're going to repeat the same stuff for the other metrics, right? This analysis will provide you with data showing you how much you deviated from your model and how much you consistently followed it, right? And that way you will measure your consistency through the data. Also, along with that, you're gonna also record all of your execution, right? Meaning you're gonna record any invalid trades or invalid losses that you executed, which weren't a part of your model, but you just took them randomly because one reason or the other, right? Invalid losses mean like losses that your model never offered, but you executed it throughout the week for some reason, either because of fear, greed, or FOMO, or whatever reason it could be, right? You're gonna note the reason of that loss as well, right? So that you can remember why you took this invalid loss, which your model never offered to you, but somehow you executed it and it turned out to be a loss. And you're gonna note down and journal the reason of why you took that extra loss, right? That your model never offered, right? In the same manner, you're going to record the wins that your model offered, but somehow you never executed them for some reason, right? It could be either due to absence or not being present in the moment, or maybe because of fear or something, right? And you're going to note down the reason for that as well. So you know and you remember why did you not take this win that your model offered and you didn't execute it and you missed out on these profits, right? you're gonna note them all. And then at the end you will end up having all of this data, right? On the left you would have the data that you recorded for your model from the previous week, and it will have all of these metrics, right? And then on the right you will have the data showing you your execution and your performance, right? And now you can see that your model ideally performed, offered 4 trades, but you actually executed five trades, right? And then you're gonna see that whether the extra trade was a loss or a win. And you can see that you have an extra loss in the data in your execution, right? And that would have, and you would have recorded the reason for that loss too, right, in a different journal, right? And you would easily point out based on this data that you had an extra loss that your model never offered but you took. That's why your execution deviated from that of the model's performance, right? And now that you have both of these data, what you're gonna do is you're gonna calculate your consistency based on this data, right? So you're gonna calculate your consistency based on ECR, or execution consistency ratio, right? And to calculate ECR, the following formula is used. ECR is equal to the number of trades your model offered, right? Meaning the amount of trades your model offered, and you're gonna divide that figure by the number of valid trades you executed, meaning how many trades that you executed that were actually similar to the trades that the model offered, plus the number of invalid losses, right? Meaning any extra loss that you took that the model never offered or signal, but you took that because of some reason, and you're gonna know that reason because you've journaled it, right? And you're gonna add that with the number of invalid wins, right? Meaning any wins that you took that your model never offered, right? You're gonna record this too, right? Because it's essential to know that the wins that you took was invalid, right? Even though it brought profits, but it was invalid because the model never suggested it. And the reason for recording and knowing it is because it's a sign of inconsistency, and maybe it brought profits to you this time, right? Right, but now it's gonna mess up with your psyche and your mindset and your psychology, and it will build bad habits for you, right? And maybe due to this, the next way you're gonna start taking invalid trades that your model never offer in the hopes of catching a win, and then you're gonna start taking invalid extra losses that your model never offered in the hopes of you catching a win, and that is gonna end up really bad for you in the long term, right? So you wouldn't want to build bad habits. That's why you're gonna record this aspect too, and then you're gonna add that amount with the wins that your model offered but you did not execute it for some reason, right? And you would know the reason because you've recorded and noted the reason, right? But because of that reason you missed out on a win, right? And you're going to record the amount of missed wins, and you will add that number too, and then you will add that number, that whole number, with the number or the amount of valid losses you didn't execute it, right? Meaning losses your model offered but you didn't execute it, right? Now you might be thinking that it's a good thing that I avoided a loss, but again remember that you're building bad habits with it, right? Because let's say you avoided a loss because of some random reason, right? You avoided a valid loss, right, that your model offered, and you did not execute it because of some reason, and now you have this idea in mind that you can start to avoid losses by not taking some trades. And then what happens is that a trade opportunity, a trade idea present itself based on your model, and you never execute that idea even though it's your model that offered it, in the hopes of thinking that maybe it could be a loss, and you're gonna avoid that because apparently you avoided a loss last week which your model offered, right? And maybe that loss is maybe that particular trade that you avoided, in the hopes of thinking that you're gonna avoid a loss, that trade turns into profits, and then that's gonna mess up with your psychology because now you missed out on a win, right? Because you somehow thought to yourself that it could have been a loss, right? And then you're gonna be clueless and your whole psychology would be messed up, right? So avoid all of that, you're gonna include that aspect too, right? And then you're gonna add all of those numbers with the numbers of trade your model offered minus the number of valid trades you executed from your model, and you're gonna add all of these numbers and you'll end up with a percentage number, and that percentage would be your ECR, right? Now I've came up with this formula myself, right, and formulated this formula with all of these metrics and factors, right? Now, if any of you have done mathematics or statistics, then you would understand the concept behind this formula, right? And you would actually be surprised as to how did I even thought of this formula and then developing it in such a refined manner, because it has some really deep metrics in there, such as the last part, right? If you are a mathematician, then you would actually be surprised, right? You would understand the concept of this formula. But if you don't know anything about maths, then just follow this formula without asking any question, right? Without asking question about how I came up with this formula or what's the purpose of each metric, right? Because first of all, that's irrelevant for you. The only thing that matters is this formula works, and with the help of this formula you can calculate consistency. That's all that matters to you, right? And second of all, it is going to take a whole another chapter to just explain how did I came up with this formula, right? So just forget about it. What you have to do is remember and write down this formula for yourself, and then at the end of each week you're going to gather all of that data and then calculate your ECR based on this, right? It's going to be pretty simple calculation, right? Just insert the data from the data that you collected in the first two parts of WPR, and then you're going to do the calculation of this formula. In the next few slides I will show you what each value for ECR represents, right? So don't worry about that too, and hopefully you know how to do basic maths, right? Otherwise I'd be a bit disappointed. So remember this formula. So moving on, for example, for the last set of data that we calculated, uh, we have this data right here now, and we're gonna calculate the ECR here. So in the nominator, we will put the number of trades our model offers, and if you look back at the data we collected, you would know that it were 4 trades, right? So we're gonna put 4 in the nominator. Then in the denominator section, we will first of all put the amount of valid trades we executed from our model, which were 4. So we put 4 there, insert 4 there. Then the amount of invalid losses, and from the previous data we saw that we had taken 1 extra loss, so we will put 1. And then the amount of invalid wins, which were 0, so insert 0. Then the amount of valid wins we missed, which were again 0, so we will put 0. And then valid losses that we missed were again 0, right? We didn't miss any valid losses, so we will put 0 here again. And then at the end we will minus the amount of valid trades we execute from the model, right? And we will minus that from the amount of trades from our model, right? So we know that our model offered 4 trades and we executed all of those 4 trades. So we subtract that from each other and we end up with 0. And we add the rest of the figures with each other and we end up with dividing. We end up with 4 divided by 5. And if we divide 4 by 5, we end up with 0.8, right? And by multiplying that with 100, it gives us a percentage of 80 ECR, right? So our ECR here based on the data we collected is 80%, right? Now you might be wondering what does this data represent, right? And to answer that we have to look at the data from the next slide. So after doing the calculation based on the data you've collected in the first two steps, or the first two parts of WPR, you will end up with a percentage value right here. First of all, you will end up with a decimal value, but you're gonna multiply that with 100 and it will give you a percentage, right? Just basic maths, nothing complicated. So you will end up with an ECR value, right? And now here you're gonna know what each ECR value essentially represents, right? Now remember the formula and the concept behind ECR is fully objective, right? But these scales that you see right here are subjective, right? And I've came up with them based on my own goals and objectives, right? That I've set for myself. So you can do any adjustment to these scales here. For example, if you have an ECR of 100%, right, meaning you did all of the calculation and your ECR is 100, then that means that you are fully consistent and you have excellent consistency, right? And you thoroughly followed your system and plan. And the theoretical data from your model and your execution were fully on point and perfect, and you never deviated from your model, right? And your execution were fully on point. That means you have excellent consistency. For example, let's say your model offers 6 trades with 3 wins and 3 losses, right? And the amount of trades that you executed were also 6 trades with 3 wins and 3 losses, all the same, and you did not took any extra losses or you did not missed any wins, In that case, you will have an ECR of 100%, right? Suggesting that your consistency was full, right? You are fully consistent and you performed perfectly. Now, 100% consistency doesn't mean that you're not gonna have a single loss, right? But essentially, it means that your execution of your model was perfect, right? Which is all that matters, right? Losses are unavoidable and inevitable, so you can't avoid them, right? But what matters is that you are consistent, right? And you are fully following your system. Similarly, ECR having a value between 70 or 100% would suggest decent consistency or good consistency, right? It's not excellent, but you did truly thoroughly follow the plan, which is what matters, right? It suggests that maybe you took an extra invalid loss, or maybe you missed a win. That's why you have a lower ECR value and a lower consistency, right? And obviously, you would have noted down the reason for those invalid extra losses or missed wins, and you would have journaled it, right? So then you could go on and then find solutions for it, and make sure that the next week you are you have found a solution, and then you can work on those solution, work on those mechanism, and then for the next week your aim would be to be fully consistent and not have these lower values, right? Similarly, if you have an ECR below 70%, then that suggests a below average consistency, and your aim should be to be more disciplined next week to improve the consistency, right? Now, for me, I've set a goal of at least 75% consistency for me, or 75% ECR for me, right? So I have a little breathing space to work with, but also at the same time, I make sure that I am disciplined enough that at the end of each week or each month, my ECR is at least 75% or above and never below it, right? And if it's below 75% for me, right, I then look at the reason behind this inconsistency and this ineffectiveness, and look for solutions and try to be more disciplined the next week or next month, right? I replicate and repeat the same process at the end of each week, each month, and at the end of each quarter, right? So that I know how I perform throughout these different time periods. You can set the same goal for yourself based on the stage that you are at in your journey, right? Now, finally, let's look at some examples right here. Now, these examples that we're gonna see are all hypothetical data, right? So just that I can explain how WPRs are done, right, and how you're gonna calculate ECR. So just remember that this is all hypothetical data right here, and you're gonna make sure to replicate the same process with your own data that you would have collected. So right here you can see on the left we got the data for how the model performed without any operating error, right? And on the right we've got the data of how the operator performed or how you executed throughout the week, right? In step one, you're gonna calculate the data on the left from your model, right? Theoretical model. And then in step two, you're gonna calculate the data on the right from your own executions. And then in step 3 you're going to calculate your ECR based on this data, and we're going to check our consistency essentially, right? So right here you can see that the model ideally offered 6 trades throughout the week, 4 of them being winning trades with 2 losses, right? These were all the valid trades that the model offered, and the win rate was 66% with an average RR of 2R, and at the end the model produced 6R worth of profits, meaning the PNL was plus 6R, right? And now looking at the data on the right, we can see that the actual amount of trades we executed and we took throughout the week were only 4 trades with 2 winners and 2 losing trades, right? So now you can see right here that we missed out on 2 trades that our model offered, but we somehow, because of some reason, didn't executed it, right? And those 2 trades were 2 winning trades that we missed because of some reason. Now you would know that reason because you would have journaled it somewhere, and you would have also noted the reason behind that missed trade, right? And then you're gonna make sure to find solutions for it so that next week you do not miss any winning trades, right? So right here you can see that we simply missed out on 2 winning trades that the model offered, but we missed it and did not execute it, right? And with that, our win rate was only 50%, right, as compared to our model, and we only produced a profit of just 2R, or our PNL was plus 2R as compared to what the model theoretically produced last week ideally, right? So now you can clearly see that you missed out on some trades that you should have taken, but you missed them, right? And that means your consistency was lower than what it should have been. And you would know the reason behind this inconsistency and this ineffectiveness, because you would have already journaled the reason behind it, right? And then you would look for solutions for it. Now, to calculate ECR based off of this formula, we're gonna first put the amount of valid trades that our model offer in the numerator, right, which is 6, and then we're going to divide that number by the amount of valid trades we executed, which were 4, plus any invalid losses, which were 0, right? And then add that with any invalid wins, which were again none, right? And then we're going to add that whole figure with any missed valid wins, which were 2, because we missed out on 2 trades, 2 winning trades. So we're going to add 2, and then we're going to add that figure with any missed valid losses, which were again none, so 0, and add that again with the amount of valid trades that the model offered minus the valid trades we executed, right? So valid trades that the model offered were 6, and we executed 4 of it successfully, so 6 minus 4 is equal to 2. And then after doing all of that calculation, we end up with a value of 0.75. Now if we multiply that with 100%, we get the percentage value, which, and we're gonna get 75% ECR, meaning our ECR is 75%, right? And this ECR value suggests that you were somewhat consistent, right? You weren't excellent, but it's kind of good. So if it had been below this value, then your performance would have been below average or poor, right? So now you can see that with ECR, you know your consistency ratio or your performance ratio each week or each month, right, with a simple percentage value, and you can measure your performance based off of this. You can then collect ECR values from multiple weeks and months of data, right? And then you can take the average of that ECR, and that will show you how you performed over a period of time. And along with that, you would have also noted down and journaled the reason behind any inconsistency or any ineffectiveness that you had. And by gathering a lot of data, you would then notice that there are some reoccurring themes or patterns among the reason or the root causes behind your inconsistency. And then based on the type of reason or cause behind your inconsistency, you can then find respective solutions for it and try to become more disciplined the next time, right? So moving on, similarly, we've got this another example here again, the modest performance data on the left, right? You can see the modest performance data on the left, and on the right you've got the data from your performance in execution, right? And you can clearly see the difference by using the formula and putting all of the data from this set of data that we've got here, and then doing all of the calculation, we get a value of 70%, which means that based on this week's data and doing a comparative analysis between both, and by using the formula correctly, we got a 70% ECR, meaning we were consistent 70%, right? Which is a below average consistency. So now you know that whether you performed good or bad each week or each month with this value in mind, right? Before this, you wouldn't have known that whether you've performed badly or whether you've performed in an excellent manner, right? But now with ECR, you have now both data from both your model and your own execution, and now you are comparing it with each other. You are looking at the reasons behind any missed wins or looking at the reasons behind any extra losses that you take, right? And you are journaling everything, and that is making sure that you are self-aware of how you're performing over a period of time. You can use this same process at the end of each month, at the end of each quarter, and even at the end of each year. So that will show you how your performance throughout that period. Now remember, these are just hypothetical examples right here. Once you try this out live and you actually use your own execution data and your data from your model, you'll see that some of you might have really really low ECR values, right? And you would be actually shocked by your performance, right? And then it would be your job to find the root cause behind an inconsistency that you have, and you're gonna solve it, right? You're gonna find solutions for it. Now, what you guys need to remember is that while doing all of this, you will also journal separately the reason behind your invalid extra losses or valid miswins, right? And you're gonna note down whether it was due to not being present, whether it was out of fear, out of greed, or whatever the reason it would be, right? And then you're gonna know, and then you're gonna be self-aware of the problems that you are struggling with, that you have issues with, right? Which are key repeatedly, which are repeating themselves over and over again, and you are falling victim to it. You're gonna be aware of those reasons, right? It could be either due to you not being disciplined enough. It could be either you because of you not being present enough, right, and not showing up every day. It could be out of fear, it could be out of greed. You can have a whole set of reasons behind it, right? And you're gonna see that there is some reoccurring theme or pattern among it. And if you find any reason or any cause that is predominantly affecting your performance, then you can then look for solutions for it. And the solution and finding solution for it is the easiest part, right? For example, if it is out of greed or out of the fear of missing out on trades, that what you can do is you can put filters in your trading, and you can remind yourself that this trade does not actually follows my trade, right? And it is not a valid trade, so I shouldn't be taking it. And as soon as you remind that yourself, you're gonna stop yourself, you're gonna become disciplined, and that problem of yours and that problem of greed would be solved. You can remind yourself that you've got other days and weeks as well that you can trade, and it doesn't have to necessarily be this particular day. And you're just working out of fear and working out of sentiments and emotions, right? And in trading, you must need to be objective at all times, right? You cannot let your psychology, your emotions, or your sentiment get the best of you, right? Or get the worst of you. So that's what you need to remember, right? And obviously, as I said before, you will be easily able to find solutions for it, right? Now I'll make sure to make a separate chapter on this part as well, right, so that you know that how to do this as well. But I've given you the layout already, and it's pretty simple, right? But remind me of this particular topic in later level of CPI, so that I could make another chapter, right, on how you're going to do this stuff as well. With ECR, you're gonna see and look, why did you had a low rating of ECR, why was it not 100%, and then you're gonna record the reason for the inconsistency of you not following your plan accurately, and look for adjustments. But if you have an ECR of 80% or more, then you're good to go, right? Then your aim should be aiming for that 100% ECR, meaning full consistency. That's what our aim is, should be. Now you're not only going to perform these WPRs weekly, but you can also do MPRs, meaning monthly performance review, or even QPRs or quarterly performance review, right? You're gonna do that at the end of each week, each month, each quarter, in each year, right? Even as a professional, profitable trader, you're still gonna do this no matter what, right? I'm a consistently profitable trader, and that's exactly what I do each week. And even though I'm earning money, I'm earning profits, I still do it because I know that it's an integral part of my trading, and it keeps me on track with my goal, so that I don't deviate from it, and I'm self-aware of my performance, right? That's why you should do this as well. You're not only going to do it at amateur level, but also at professional level, right? At amateur level, you're going to gather theoretical data about the performance of different entry models and systems, and you're going to then compare them with each other. And once you gather enough data, you will look at the performance and see which one gained the most profits in RR in terms of P&L, and you're going to try each one of them out in live markets and see which one or which model suits you the best, and which one are you more comfortable with executing, right, and which one offers you the least amount of problems. That's what you're gonna do.